Welcome to the Mick, a Mook, and a Mike, hosted by four-time Emmy-nominated producer Frank Bates and retired New York City firefighter, 9/11 first responder, and Vietnam vet, Billy O'Connor.
Today's guest, retired sports anchor for New York City, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, and the author of Always Turn Down the First Offer, Tony Hernandez.
Brother Billy, my brother Frank, how you doing, pal?
How you doing today?
Like I said, any better I cancel my life insurance. Gotta be jealous of me. Look,
Yeah.
what's not to like?
What can possibly be your life insurance? Your life insurance won't even pay for burying you. Sorry,
They take
yes.
checks, Frank. They take checks. As long as I can pay for it with a check, I'm solid.
Yep.
Life is good, man. I'm living on a 30-foot boat with my wife, and life is good. She's healthy, so
Yep.
that's all that counts.
That's all that
it.
counts.
Everything else is, who cares?
Our guest today is Tony Hernandez, veteran sportscaster, now retired and living in Montana, but he's got some great stories about coming up as a sportscaster and being a sportscaster in New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco. He had a great career.
Yeah, I read his book. It's a terrific book. We'll talk about it when he comes on, I'm sure. And what was the title of it? Never take the first offer.
Never take the first offer.
Or don't take the first
don't
offer.
take the
Never
first
take
offer.
the first offer. And Joe West just told us for 60 days, 60 days suspension. He took the first offer. He was jumped at it for drunken driving.
He told us that 2-3 weeks ago.
He did.
But you expect the audience to recall that?
Yeah,
Well, I recall it. I mean, it
exactly. If he can pick it up, that's okay.
Well, Terry's got a point.
Speaking of Joe West, why don't we bring him on?
That's a great idea.
Joe.
Let's go way out west.
There we go.
How you doing, my friend?
Wonderful. Great to see you guys.
Good to see you, Joe.
Well, we're getting close. We're getting closer and closer to pitchers and catchers reporting. Do you miss it at all?
No, not at all. In fact, my wife has quit yelling at me too, so I'm in good shape.
So you're tired. You ever wonder how you had time to go to work? I mean, you got so much stuff to do now, or is it? Are you just idle? Or I mean,
Well, no, I've been to a couple of signings that I've never understood how all that worked, and John Boggs sent me to a signing in Chicago, and the first person I saw there was Steve Carlton. He never spoke to me when he pitched. He never spoke to me as a player. And I come in, he said, "Hello, Joe, how you doing? I see on the internet that you converse with my friend Gus Heffling, and he was talking to me like I was the next door neighbor. And but when he pitched, he was serious, never said a word to the umpire. In fact, when McCarver would say something to the umpire, he'd yell at McCarver, "Don't bother the umpires, leave them alone. You just catch." So,
wow.
but it was cool. It's the first time I had a real conversation with Steve in my entire life. Pedro Martinez was there. Jim McMahon was there. It was a big show. The first thing I noticed was there was about 50 football helmets on a rack. And there was a guy on the other side signing them. And when he got about halfway through, I realized it was Brian Urlacher. So
Wow.
it was a crazy show, and it was a lot of fun.
I'll tell you my Steve Carlton story. We were in Cooperstown one year and with Rod Carew, and he said, let's go play golf at the Leather Stocking golf course, which is adjacent to the Otesaga Hotel. So we went out. Johnny Bench was on the first tee, and Al Kaline was on the first tee. So Rod said, "Can we join you?" So we joined them. About the third hole, Carlton came up, and he said, "Can I join you guys?" So we played as a fivesome. He said, "Damn," he said, I got in at 3 a.m. The bar was closed. This is the soberest I'll be all weekend.
I read Carlton used to strengthen his wrist by punching sand in a bucket, like pushing his hand through sand.
Buckets of rice, I thought.
Rice, yeah.
It was Rice, because his trainer was a guy named Gus Heffling, and Gus was the trainer for the Los Angeles Rams when Roman Gabriel played there. And when Gabriel left there to go to Philadelphia, he took Gus with him. So when Gabriel retired as an Eagle, Gus went over and started working with the Phillies, and that's where he met Carlton, and that's where Gus was a Taekwondo master. And he was an unbelievable fitness guy. He didn't believe in running because he felt like that jarred your knee joints and everything. but he did believe in all kinds of exercises like the one Frank's and Billy were talking about cramming your hand in a rice barrel to see how deep you could go every time. He was an unbelievable trainer. And I think he's in his late 80s now. He's living over in Clearwater. So
one of the most remarkable statistics I ever heard was one year the Philadelphia Phillies won 54 games and Steve Carlton won 27 of them.
That's incredible. And they never scored any runs for him either, right? Was that the knock on the Phillies at the time? They couldn't score any runs.
Was he with the Phillies then, or was he with the Cardinals?
No, he was with the Phillies then.
He was with the Phillies already. Yeah, because he won more than half of their games.
That's unbelievable.
Amazing competitor.
Yep.
How's he a golfer? Is he a good golfer?
Yeah, all those guys are good golfers.
Are they?
Yeah, all those guys, they got hand-eye coordination. They, Bench used to hit the ball a mile. Even Carew started playing late in his life. He had 6 hole-in-ones in the first 4 years he played. I mean,
what?
That's crazy. He would call me up. He said, "Guess what?" And I said, "Fuck you," because he had another hole-in-one.
Holy shit!
Yep, and he was breaking 80. Bench was good enough to play on the senior tour. Carlton was a great player, and Kaline was a great player.
Wow.
Did
you guys, when you guys play with these guys, don't you get a bit intimidated? I mean, knowing that they're real good golfers, and I'm not saying you're not, Frank.
Well,
we get extra shots. We get more shots than anybody else.
As Bobby Riggs once said, it's not how you play the game, it's how you negotiate the handicap that counts.
Yeah, they say every golf bet is won and lost in the first hole.
It is won and lost on the first hole.
That's it.
Well,
first tee. I'm sorry.
First tee.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Joe, for being with us today, giving us sparkling notoriety on how to negotiate for an umpire 60 days. Wait a second. Was that this
week?
That
was the last interview.
Oh, shit. Well, hang on.
Well, we'll repeat it. It's worth repeating.
Yeah, well, no, let's not. Derek will cut around it. I'll start again. Joe, thanks for being with us today. Another preamble into... Can you say it? Can you do it? Can you thank
Joe,
him? I'm
Joe,
having trouble.
Thanks a lot for being with us today, Joe. We really appreciate you coming on, pal, as always. Thanks for the insights into the game.
And
always a pleasure.
And give Rita my best.
I'll do it.
Thank you.
You got it.
All right, brother. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Joe's always a great guy.
Yeah, he's terrific.
He's
some of the stories he just slips right into.
Yep.
And the Copa, nobody got shot inside the Copa. Nobody got shot outside the Copa. That makes me feel better about going there.
And Derek, now can you get sportscaster Tony Hernandez on for us?
Oh yeah, I can do that.
Momo, how you doing? Momo.
Good. I'm going to let you explain that one. I'm doing great. How are you?
Well, we met in 1982.
Was it 82?
82, 81,
no,
83,
Frank.
84. Oh, it's got to be
84. 84 was Bass Lane.
84. Because
84 was Bass Lane.
Yeah, because my daughter wasn't born in 82, and a rocket scientist.
There you go.
She's integral to this story.
Okay.
She really is.
So anyway, Tony was, I guess, between jobs, and I noticed in the paper that KABC or KCBS announcer Tony
KBC Channel 7
Channel 7 announcer Tony Hernandez was, I don't know, available, whatever it said. So I said, hey, I need a host for this ESPN triathlon that I'm producing. Tony Hernandez would be a real get.
Yeah.
So I called him and I said, Tony, I really don't have any money, but would you like to come to Bass Lake and host a triathlon? So he said yes, and my daughter came up and his wife Dale came up, and we started becoming friends like that. And
do you remember, Frank, that my suitcase with my clothes went to Hawaii?
I read it in the book.
Okay.
I read it in the book. I can't remember everything.
Yeah, so I had to wear your clothes.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
And Billy, it worked.
It worked. The white belt, was it the white belt and the white shoes deal or what?
But anyway,
Yeah.
anyway, the Momo name comes from my daughter Erin. She was about maybe 1 or something. He was doing a dut or something on her, and she would go Mo Tony,
Oh,
Mo
Mo, I love
Tony.
it.
So we started calling him Mo Tony. So
Momo. I thought
Yeah.
you met him at the Metropolitan Museum of Art or something. It was MoMA.
no.
No,
That's a great story.
So
Momo.
Momo Tony. So he's
Momo.
been Momo ever since.
You guys really go back. Yeah, that's saying something.
Yeah.
You know, I read your book, and I love the book, by the way. Great book. I really
Thank you.
enjoyed it. Never take that. Always turn down the first offer. And I got to tell you, you know, when I wrote my first book, a lot of people on the internet were telling me, you know what line I like? You know what line I like? You know what line really flipped me out? And it was never the same line, which always blew me
Well-
away. Like 50 people would have 50 different lines. And the line in your book that blew me away, and it really did blow me away because I'm a New Yorker, was when you said, I grew up in New York City, and the reason is because the city forces you to grow up. And
Absolutely.
that is a profound statement to me about New York.
There's no question in my mind about that. Yeah, it forced me to grow up.
It's just a great summary of New York in general.
I mean, you walk out the front door in New York and life just hits you right in the face. And
yeah,
you have to grow up fast.
Well, you grew up fast because you went from Salinas to San Francisco to New York City within 6 months.
Yeah, probably a little too fast, Frank.
But
But, you know,
I remember you were at Channel 2.
Sure. I
Billy
grew up in
remembers
New
you
York,
when you were
remember?
Channel 2.
oh, wow.
What was it like being 25 years old and dealing with the likes of Reggie Jackson and Billy Martin and the Bronx Zoo and the New York Knicks and
I know. It
the
was
Giants, the Jets?
it was a fantasy come true. It's something I always wanted. I didn't expect it to happen that quickly. And when it did, I wasn't sure that I was prepared to be working in the #1 market in the country, in the world at that time. But hey, I wasn't going to turn down the first offer. Which, in retrospect, Howard Cosell was right because he's the one who said that line to me the first time I met him. And that's how I met him. That's in the book too, and that's how the book opens, actually. I was working in San Francisco, and I was waiting for the Kansas City Chiefs to come into the Mark Hopkins Hotel on Nob Hill in the city. That's where they were staying. And they were going to play the 49ers on Monday Night Football. And so the ABC crew was staying there too. And they came in, led by Cosell, of course. And he saw the Channel 7 pin on my lapel. And ABC owned and operated a station. So he walks up to me. All he says is, always turn down the first offer, and walks away. And I stood there mesmerized. But again, in retrospect, that was good advice. I just didn't take it often enough.
That's amazing, though. Out of the blue, a guy like Cosell comes up, who was obviously probably an idol of yours at the time because he was the top
Yeah.
of his game, and just come out with that. Always turn down the first offer, kid, and go on. Just move on.
Yeah, I didn't really know what he meant. I should have taken advantage of it.
So tell me about those New York years.
Well, it was again, it was a dream come true experience, Frank. I got there in '72 in June, and I'll be honest, from what I had heard about New York, how dangerous it was, I was afraid to live in the city right away. So I got an apartment in Queens. Oh God, there's a senior moment. Can't even remember the town in Queens right now. Anyway, so my apartment, it was stifling hot in June, and the apartment I had, the air conditioner didn't work. So I had to sleep the first night, and it was sweltering. And when I was afraid to go to sleep because I didn't think I was going to survive the night and that I wouldn't make it to the morning, but I did. And finally, the next day, the air conditioner got fixed, so that was fine. But I I commuted into the city for about 6 months. And finally, I woke up and realized it was okay for me to live in Manhattan. So finally, I got an apartment, a 4-flight walk-up brownstone on East 49th Street between 2nd and 3rd. Unbelievable neighborhood. I didn't understand how great it was until one day I'm looking out my front window, and I see a limousine pull up across the street to a bigger brownstone than mine, much bigger, and Katharine Hepburn is let out of the limousine, and her driver opens the trunk, and he's getting all her grocery bags out of the trunk as she goes up to her apartment. And then I find out that a couple doors down from her, Stephen Sondheim was living. Behind me on East 50th, Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward had a place. And so it was unbelievable that I was living in this neighborhood, and these were my neighbors, although I only saw Katharine Hepburn once, never saw Stephen Sondheim. And I used to see Paul Newman when I worked for my goodness, I'm losing my memory right in front of you guys.
But your hair looks great.
And your teeth.
When I was let go by Channel 2, by CBS, I started freelancing, and I got a job for WRFM in the city on Madison Avenue. And I was able to, it was only about 10 blocks from where I live. So I worked a midnight to 6 a.m. shift playing Mantovani type music on these big reel-to-reel tapes. And I would sit there with the program log and keep track of when everything was happening and when the commercials were being read and the public service announcements. And there were 4 big reel-to-reel tapes that I had to replace because each one would run about 30 minutes. They would stop. I would back announce the Mantovani type music, read a public service announcement or the occasional commercial between midnight and 6, and then walk home. And there was a delicatessen on 2nd Avenue and 49th Street that was open at that hour. So I'd go in there and pick up some stuff, and I'd see Newman in there. And I never had the courage to go up to him and say anything, but I would see him in there as well. So New York, again, I should have been a little older, a little more mature. I should have had an agent. I didn't have one at that time. I was just happy to be there.
But you know,
I'd see Walter Cronkite getting ready for the CBS Evening News each night in his studio. Never really met him or talked to him, but I could walk by his studio and peek in and see him getting ready.
you know, after you became an Angelino and you had a 25-year career here, Paul Newman told me the same story about you. He said,
Really?
he said, I went to the, if I had known this guy would have been so famous in Los Angeles, I would have gone up to him and I would have introduced myself.
Frank, that's good to know. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Hey, you were one of the first guys to use your Spanish surname to your advantage, because I met your parents. Your father was a baseball player. His name was Hernandez. And how did that help you get your first job? Because you were an affirmative action hire.
Yeah, I was. And when I tell a lot of people that now, because that happened in December of 1971, people now will ask me, well, why did they care that your last name was Hernandez in 1971? And, I had to explain, well, affirmative action may not have been officially known then, but it was beginning way back then. And I was working in Salinas at KSBW Channel 8 in Salinas, and I was thinking about quitting that job and going back to college to get my teaching credential. And I ran into a former news director of mine at that station. He said, well, before you quit, call KGO in San Francisco. They are looking for a weekend sportscaster with a Spanish surname. So I called him up and I got the news director on the line. I said, hola, me llamo Antonio Hernandez.
Good call.
Not really. I said that in English. But he invited me up for an interview and had one interview and hired me. And again, you know, the business, I asked him for a contract. And he said, no, you're not going to get a contract. You're going to work here freelance. And you're going to work Saturdays and Sundays. And they didn't want me to come in during the week because the #1 sports guy didn't want me around Monday through Friday. So I worked 2 days a week. I made union scale, which at that time was not very good at all. But in 1971, the amount I made was enough to live on, and I could save money. So I shared an apartment with 2 other guys in Sausalito. So there I was, living in Sausalito.
Wow.
Working 2 days a week for KGO. And 5 months later, WCBS called and said, do you want to work in New York? And that's how I got there. But so it was a whirlwind, Frank and Billy. You know, it all happened so fast. And again, I just went with the flow.
Yeah.
And I was just happy to be there. Had a great time. If I had to do it all over again, yeah, I would have changed my approach somewhat.
Yeah, well, in New York, you were reunited with a minor league teammate by the name of
Bud Harrelson.
with the Mets.
Wow.
Yeah, played shortstop for the Mets. He and I played together in high school.
Oh, in high school.
In high school, he played short. I played second, and you know, from his junior year on, there was no doubt that he was at least going to be a professional player. But he's probably the hardest working, most dedicated guy I've ever played with.
Wow.
Not a great hitter, but he can get on base. He had great speed, and he's one of the best defensive shortstop I've ever seen.
And
I got to see him. I got to see him every day.
And he was fearless because he got in a fight with Pete Rose.
That's right.
Everybody remembers
Absolutely.
that fight. Anybody who's a Mets fan remembers that fight.
Yep.
Yes.
And
of
you remember
course.
you did play a little basketball with Pete Rose, from what I understand in the book.
Very little. Yeah, I was working in Philadelphia, and that's when Pete signed with the Phillies. So they set up this exhibition basketball game between the media and the Philadelphia Phillies. Although the Phillies team had Joe Bryant on it, JB, Jelly Bean Bryant, Kobe's father.
His dad. Yeah.
His dad. And so yeah, I played, and I'll never forget, they wanted me to guard Rose, and he was playing point guard for the Phillies team. So we're at the top of the key, and I had interviewed Pete just before that because it was right around the time when he signed with the Phillies for, at that time, if not the biggest contract, certainly one of the biggest contracts in MLB history. But anyway, so he's dribbling up court, and he comes to the top of the key, and he recognizes me from the interview we had done the day or two before, and he gets this big smile on his face, and he fakes one way, I go for it, and he dribbles around me, and I'm left standing there holding my jock strap. So that was my confrontation with Pete Rose competitively. he was something else.
And competitive at that level as well, right? He still wasn't. No way you were
No
going to show up.
question. Oh yeah, absolutely.
So you moved to Los Angeles in the late 70s, early 80s?
1979, March.
And how did that come about?
Oh, Frank. These are great stories. It's all in the book, too. Working in Philly. And I was under contract, finally. I didn't turn down the first offer, though. I accepted it. So, AYW Channel 3 in Philadelphia, their ratings started to sink. So they brought in new management for the news operation. And these people were from KDKA TV in Pittsburgh. And in Pittsburgh, they had a sports guy named Bill Curry, who was very flamboyant, didn't really have a sports background. He was a showman. He used to wear plaid sport coats and bow ties and boutonnieres in his jacket. And
Much the way Billy dresses when he goes out.
is it?
My idea of getting dressed up is not having a logo on my shirt. That's my idea.
I got you.
My gay talise.
And Curry was nicknamed the Mouth of the South. He was from the South, and so throughout his career, he became known as the Mouth of the South. And so what they wanted us to do, I would read the news of the day in sports on the 11 o'clock news at night. And then I would introduce Bill Curry sitting next to me, and he would talk about whatever he wanted. Didn't necessarily have to be sports. Could be, but didn't have to be. And I saw this as a sign that not good for my career. So I decided I had to find a way out of there. And as timing would have it, I got a call from the news director at KABC TV in Los Angeles saying to me, we are very interested in you coming here to be our #1 sports guy Monday through Friday for big dollars. He said, but that's all I can say to you. Otherwise, it could be considered tampering. He says, so you think it over and you let me know. Well, again, I'm sitting there thinking LA, Hollywood, big dollars. What are big dollars in LA? So I had visions of sudden wealth and fame. So I got out of my contract with KYW, risked a lot, but I got out of it. Called up the news director at KABC at the time and said, well, I'm out of the contract. He said, great. When can you come to LA? No interview, nothing. So we moved out there in March of '79. But when I got there, the news director wasn't there the day I arrived. So I went in to speak with the general manager, and the offer was nowhere near big dollars. It was just slightly above what I was making in Philadelphia, because the general manager pointed out he knew what I was making in Philadelphia. He offered me a nominal raise, 5-year contract. And as I said, not for big dollars. So I explained to him, well, news director said I was going to be your #1 guy. He said, well, yeah, we've had a change of heart. He says, you're not known in the marketplace. So we need you to start off on the weekends and make a name for yourself. And then we can move you in. I said, let me think about it. So I was staying at the Hilton Hotel in Universal City. And I go back to my room. And this is in January of '79. And it was 100 degrees in LA that day. So I opened the blinds. I'm looking out towards the north Fernando Valley, San Fernando Valley. And it's beautiful. It's LA. So I called Dale and explained the situation. I said, what am I going to do? We really don't have any options here. I said, I'll do what I always do. I'll work hard and good things will come of it. So the next day I went back and I accepted the first offer again. Yeah. So you feel a pattern here? So, but yeah, I started there in March of '79 and worked in LA for 26 years, Frank. Wow. At 4 different TV stations over those 26 years.
But that's an amazing feat to work in the same market for 26 years. I mean, you've got to be commended for your resiliency and everything that it takes to survive for 26 years in this market, because you saw a lot of guys come and go. Yeah, I did. And Keith Olbermann once said to me when he was working at Channel 2, at KCBS in Los Angeles, he said to me, he says, Tony, if we have an earthquake and you're here, I want you standing right next to me because you've survived every disaster. So if we have another one, I want to be near you because then I know I'll survive too. And when Keith was in junior high school, he lived in New York in Westchester County. And he told me when he got to LA and we met, he said, I was
I was at my grandmother's house when I was in 8th grade, and we were watching you on Channel 2 in New York. And I said to my grandmother, I want to be like him someday.
Wow.
And now Keith is an excellent and unusual talent. So he wasn't like me. But anyway, he did say both of those things to me. So yeah, I mean, I worked with a lot of people, a lot of good people, and I loved working in LA. But my dream of becoming the #1 sports anchor in LA didn't happen. Well, not in LA proper, at a station in LA, I should say. That never happened until I was about 11 years into my career there. And Jeff Wald, who was a former news director at KTLA Channel 5, he went to KCOP TV Channel 13, become their news director and revolutionize their news. And he asked me to come and be the #1 guy. So I went, although KCOP TV's ratings was not going to make anyone well known and famous, but at least I was the #1 guy there.
Yep.
And I got to do that again at the end of my career at KTLA Channel 5 because Wald moved to Channel 5 and Stu Nahan was retiring at that time. So I called Jeff and I said, hey, Jeff, Stu's retiring. Have you chosen anybody yet to replace him? He said, no. I said, well, would you consider me? He said, of course. So he hired me. And that's where I ended my career and retired in April of 2004 from Channel 5.
You know, two people you spoke about in your book, one surprised me immensely, and the other one didn't surprise me at all. You were talking about the fact that you were a ball player, your uncles were a ball player, your father was a ball player, but Billy Crystal, you said, was a really, really good infielder. That surprised me. And then you said Tommy Lasorda was a cheap bastard, and that didn't surprise me
because you've heard that.
That wasn't a quote of mine.
Not a quote. I'm paraphrasing.
I don't. No, Tommy never met a free meal he didn't
That's
like.
exactly what Frank and I wrote in the book.
I never called him cheap. I never called him cheap or a bastard. So.
Well, no, but he wasn't a cheap bastard. But he did use both sides of the toilet paper, from what I understand.
But he was cheap and he was a bastard. So
he wasn't a cheap bastard.
Yeah.
But Billy Crystal, a terrific infielder.
Yes, he was. I mean, I was surprised too. He had good hands. He was quick. He couldn't hit very well, but he played good defense. So that's how I got to know Billy, because the media would play baseball games before a Dodger game every summer against the Hollywood Stars. And so Billy would play short for them, and I'd play short for the media team. 2 years we did that together.
Did you leave your gloves on the field back then?
No. No, we took him in.
Well, you do got to tell us the Tommy Lasorda story, though, because Tommy's a particular target of ours.
1967, Billy. I was playing for the Caldwell, Idaho Cubs in the Pioneer Rookie League. Okay. And our first road trip was to Ogden, Utah, to play the Ogden Dodgers. Now, the manager was Tom Lasorda. But Tom Lasorda then was not the Tom Lasorda that came to Los Angeles and had his great career with the Dodgers. My teammates and I, when we took the field for pregame warmups, Lasorda was in the stands yelling at the top of his lungs at anyone he saw. To us, the opposition, to people coming into the ballpark to watch the game. When the umpires took the field, he would yell at them, yell at our opposing manager. It was unbelievable. I had never seen anything like it or heard anything like it. And we all quickly grew to hate him. Of course, not knowing that Tommy Lasorda would eventually become a Hall of Fame manager. But at that point in time, in 1967, we couldn't stand him.
Oh.
And I met Tommy in 79 when I came out to work in Los Angeles. And I never brought that particular part of the story up to him. but he didn't remember me, and of course, why would he? I didn't last very long. I played that one season, and that was it.
But in
and that's-
1988, you were the Dodgers broadcaster on
Yeah.
Z Channel. He probably remembered you by then.
I'm sure he did. Yes, yeah. Rick Monday and Rick was my color analyst, and we worked for Z Channel that season. And in 1988, of course, they won the World Series and didn't win it again until the shortened season in 2020. So those years in between, I took full credit, of course, for having been their play-by-play guy on cable TV, and therefore that's why they won the World Series in '88.
Well,
And I also got to cover some Angels games, and my color analyst for those was Joe Torre. And what an honor it was to work beside that guy.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like working next to royalty, baseball royalty.
wasn't there an anecdote with Lasorda that I read in your book about the expense account at dinner?
Yeah.
I'd like to hear
Yeah.
that one.
79. Well, Dennis Swanson, the news director at KBC TV, he wanted me to be similar to a newspaper beat writer for television news and cover the Dodgers every game. Now, it didn't work out that I covered every game, but I covered the vast majority of games home and away in 1980. For my first road trip, I'm on the Dodgers plane, flying to Montreal, 3-game road trip, Montreal, New York, and Philadelphia. So we're on our way to Montreal. Lasorda sees me sitting on the plane. He walks by, he says, "Hey, you're on the expense account, right?" I said, "Yeah, I am." He says, "Good. You're taking me to dinner tonight." Just like that. He
Can
says,
you imagine?
I'll let you know where.
Wow.
Okay. So he lets me know where. I don't remember the name of the restaurant, but it was a fine restaurant in Montreal. So I get there early. And here comes Lasorda. He walks in with 6 players and coaches.
Unbelievable.
Okay. So, of course, I had to pay for the whole thing. The bill was quite hefty, as you can imagine. So I put it on my expense voucher when I get back, and I'm called into the news director's office. He says, "Tony, I'm glad you had the opportunity to do that, but please don't ever do that again." So that was Tommy.
Unbelievable, huh?
Tommy did that.
Goal.
Tommy did that with Sinatra once,
Did he?
and that led to him telling Tony O, "He's dead to me now."
Wow.
Yeah.
That was the same.
Woo!
So
He,
now you're
he walked
talking
into
about-
Sinatra's dressing room unannounced with 6 people, and after he did that, Sinatra turned to his road manager and said, "He's dead to me from now on."
Wow.
But that's remarkable. I mean, the gall of somebody taking 6 or 7
Yeah.
people on your expense account. And then they ask you up front. I mean, you got it for chutzpah. What is it? Chutzpah? Is that
Chutzpah.
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 Holy
Whatever it
shit.
is. Chutzpah.
Even I know that
Balls.
one.
We call them balls.
Yeah, well, just use words that you know.
I ain't Jewish, Frank. You might be surprised at that. William Patrick Michael O'Connor, I ain't Jewish.
Yeah.
Balls.
Well, I got a question before. Frank, can you tell me what's that on the right? On the right,
That's a picture.
the
That's a
right of his screen.
That's a picture of Tony and Rick Monday.
No. To the right of
Our screen.
Tony's. Screen.
It looks like a basketball picture.
No. It's right to. It's
Fuck you. Okay, it's an Emmy.
It's an Emmy.
It's a fucking Emmy. I don't have one. I don't have one.
Nominated, though.
You don't have one?
I-
Well,
no, I don't have one.
Frank, this is a local Emmy, Los Angeles. Tony Little and I co-hosted the 1986 LA Marathon on Channel 13. And we both won Emmys.
Good for
They're
you.
Southern California regional Emmys.
I'm so happy for you and Tony. So
That's
other
amazing, by the way,
highlight-
Tony. Tony, I just want to say that's amazing.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, it's one thing to be nominated. It's another thing to win it. You know?
Yeah, funny. So other highlights of your career must have been covering Magic Johnson and the Lakers.
Oh, of course. First time I interviewed Magic.
Did you take him out to dinner?
No,
Did he
no,
show
no,
up
he
with
didn't
6
even
people
ask.
and the coaches?
He didn't ask. So I said, Magic, to what do you owe your ability to make these no-look passes to teammates behind your back while you're in motion? How do you do that? And Magic looks at me and he says, sincerely, he says, I don't know, man. I guess I must have ESPN. but I love Magic.
A billionaire.
Magic,
A billionaire. ESPN.
ESPN. Yeah, I mean he's the best.
Wait a minute. I just want to.
Uh-oh.
Well, how old was Magic when you asked this question?
Early 20s, Derek.
Okay.
I mean,
yeah.
It was his rookie season.
Yeah.
Okay. So it might have been 81 if it was his rookie season.
80-81.
80-81.
No. Wait.
79 was the championship game. So 79-80 was his first season.
It was 79-80.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So come on, give the man a break.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. How many books?
No,
have
I
you?
thought it was very funny.
Oh no, it was funny. It's funny. I just want to protect
Yeah.
my friend at Magic. Yeah. But
Absolutely.
go ahead, Frank.
If he's your friend, he wouldn't be Magic. He would be Irvin.
Oh,
If
okay.
he was your friend. So I'm just saying.
You call.
Magic's his professional name.
Joe,
Irvin
we
is
had
his
umpire Joe West on before. I'm sure you're familiar with umpire, Hall of Fame umpire Joe West.
Maybe Hall of Fame.
Well,
Hopefully Hall of Fame.
He'll be Hall of Fame. I mean, come on, he's umpired more games than anybody. And he was telling stories about Steve Carlton. You got a Steve Carlton story, don't you? I'd like to hear it.
A couple of them. First workout, I went to cover the Phillies. He was pitching batting practice, and I didn't know any better. He was coming off the mound, so I raced out to meet him halfway with my cameraman, and I said, Steve, I'm Tony Hernandez. I'm working at KYW Channel 3. Could I do an interview with you for tonight's broadcast? And he walks right by me and says, I don't do interviews. I didn't realize that Carlton, a few years prior to that, had a confrontation with a newspaper writer and claims he was misquoted, and decided he was not going to talk to anyone in the media ever again. So never got to interview him, but it was to the point where the Cubs won the National League pennant. I'm sorry, the Phillies beat the Cubs to win the National League pennant. I want to say it was 77 or 78. And so I'm in Chicago covering the game. The Phillies win. They're celebrating in those closet-like confines of the Wrigley Field clubhouse area at that time, and Carlton's not to be seen. Everybody else is celebrating, being interviewed. So somebody asked, "Where's Carlton?" And one of the team people said, "He's sitting on the john and with the door closed. He's not coming out." So I'm thinking, that's a shame. That's a real shame that somebody has to do that to avoid being interviewed. But he was an unbelievable pitcher, and it's pretty sad that
I guarantee he had a couple of bottles of champagne behind that stall.
I hope so.
Based on my past experience with Steve.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Alcohol, huh? Really? According to Joe West, he wouldn't talk to him either on the field or any umpires or anybody else.
Not even umpires.
Super introverted guy, I guess. Like Joe
Wow.
DiMaggio led the league in room service. If that's true or not. I mean, but I didn't know he was a heavy hitter. Carlton.
Huh.
Sometimes you have to pay attention to the show.
I do. I just have bad retention because I was a heavy hitter.
I told a story about how he showed up in Cooperstown.
Right.
I believe earlier on this show. And he
Not
said,
only- okay.
he said, I got in at 3:00.
Right.
This is the most sober. The bar was
Oh, for the
closed.
whole
This is
day,
the
yeah,
mo-
yeah.
Thank you.
As you can
I'm
tell,
sorry.
Tony, there's some ball breaking going on. over here.
Holy shit!
Well, that's because I did drink.
Oh.
My memory's not as good as it used to be.
Holy. So, Tony, you were a thespian also. You said Pete Rose signed the biggest contract in 1979 with the Phillies. I think you signed the smallest contract when you were in Rocky III.
Yeah, there's no question about that. Again, I mean, I'm sitting at work at Channel 7, phone rings, I answer it. Hey, Tony, how would it like to be in Rocky 3? Again, I see, Frank, one of the biggest mistakes of my career, just one of, I wasn't represented. I don't, you know, I finally got an agent later, but early on, I didn't. So I said, of course I'd like to be in Rocky 3. Yeah, and he said, okay, we'll pay you $300. And he said, do you belong to SAG, Screen Actors Guild? I said, no. He said, well, you're going to have to join to be in this movie.
Oh, boy.
So I said, okay. So I called Screen Actors Guild, and they said it was going to be $250 to join. This was in 81. So I called this guy back, and I said, it's going to cost me $250 to join SAG. You're going to pay me $300. After you take taxes out, I'm going to end up losing money. So he says, hold on. So he puts me on hold for a couple minutes. He comes back on, he says, Sly likes you. As if Sly even knows who I am, right? He says, Sly likes you. We'll give you $600. Take it or leave it. So I took it, of course. But that was the second offer.
Yeah.
You're doing better. You're doing better.
And you're still collecting residuals on that.
Residuals, at least every quarter since 1982.
Wow.
They'll send you a
I
quarter.
get these little checks in the mail.
Well, if it keeps coming, the money will, balloon up to a trickle.
Could be, Billy.
And you were the ring announcer?
I worked for a circus for a while. Yeah, between jobs. The Emmett Kelly Jr. All-Star Circus,
No,
America's only one-ring circus.
No. I mean, in Rocky III, you were a ring announcer?
Oh! Sorry about that. I thought you said ringmaster.
No,
Yeah, that's another story.
We learned something.
which is in the book. Well, no, I worked as a TV announcer, sportscaster, typecast, of course. And my scene was being on the set with Mr. T, who was Clubber Lang in the movie, who defeats Rocky. And now we're on the set, and the questions are you going to give Rocky a rematch, et cetera, et cetera. So Mr. T has trouble with his lines. And Sly, Stallone comes up to us, the director. And, Stallone would never look us in the eye. He would always turn his profile and talk to us. And he says to me, you do this for a living, right? I said, yeah. He said, okay, just make up the questions. T, just say whatever you want. So the scene is 50% ad-libbed, really. But it was great. What an experience. And Frank, you lived it on a daily basis. But for me, to be on that movie set at the sports arena, that's where they had a ring in there for some of the fight scenes, and they built a TV news set for us. And not only did I interview Mr. T about the fight, I did an editorial claiming that Rocky, basically, he was finished and he should hang him up. And of course, that inspired Rocky to have the rematch, and he comes back and wins.
Well,
but just to be on that set and see how things worked, and when Stallone, and it was a huge crew, dozens and dozens of people working on that show, and when Stallone walked down off the set, back onto the floor, the crew just parted like the Red Sea. And Stallone walks through them, and I'm thinking, my God, what respect a movie director commands. I mean, I don't know if that's true in all cases. You would know better, Frank. But it was a wonderful experience.
Yeah, I think
it was worth the $600.
I think they were responding more to Stallone's star appeal than to his director appeal. I'll tell you two quick stories about that. when I was with Pony, I had a client by the name of Carl Rule, and Carl was a big German guy. And Carl says, "You got to set me up to see Stallone." So I said, "Okay, I'll make a phone call." So I made a phone call, and Stallone said he would see us at the Paramount lot. So we went into the gym where he was working out, and Carl says, they say, "Yo, how you doing?" And Carl says, "How are you doing?" Carl says, "Look, I want to ask you one question. I have known and worked with Mr. T for many years. How the fuck did you get that motherfucker to do all those lines?" And Stallone said, "I paid him."
You know, in the book, it's These Lips Could Talk. Frank, we have a chapter about Stallone, and you mentioned that you were impressed by how smart he was, how quick he was.
Absolutely.
And when I read Tony's anecdote, that's the first thing that hit me. That's pretty damn smart to tell the guy, "Look, you do this for a living, just do what you do, and tell Mr. T, make up the lines, just answer the questions."
Yep. And the
Yeah,
other,
that's what happened.
Good
the other
smart
thing
stuff.
was I was with a kid who we had been with you earlier in the day. I don't remember who it was. And now it was in the late 2000s or so. It was in the 2000s or something. And the kid then went home and saw Rocky 3. And he called me and he said, "I saw Tony's son in a movie."
Wow. Wow.
Oh well,
Well,
still got great hair.
Yeah, well,
Still
you know,
got
when my grandsons first saw me in Rocky 3, they said, "Oh, their dad, Josh, my son, he asked his kids, my grandsons, 'Do you know who that is?' And they said, 'That's Uncle Tori. Tori's my other son,
yep.
who looks a lot
He looks
like me.'"
a lot like you.
Wow.
Yeah, and so they thought it was Tori, but yeah, that was. I had bigger hair then, and it was darker.
A white man's afro.
Reggie Jackson,
Why don't you tell that story?
first time at Yankee Stadium, 1972. Oakland A's were playing the Yankees, and this was before Yankee Stadium was renovated the first time. This was the original Yankee Stadium, and what a shrine. Anyway, so I'm at the batting cage watching the A's take batting practice, and I hear this voice behind me. "Hey, I like your white man's afro." Turn around, it's Reggie. Didn't come up to me. And he walks away and he drifts off back to the dugout. So that was my first meeting with Reggie. But then I had a much more interesting one when he was with the Yankees playing the Angels at Anaheim Stadium, 1979. You want to hear that one?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Can't leave
Okay.
our audience hanging.
So, okay, so news director Dennis Swanson, he says, "Tony, I know you're going out to Anaheim Stadium today, Yankees, Angels." He says, "I want you to do a live interview with Reggie Jackson." Okay, Dennis, sure. So I'm telling people I work with, I'm going out, get Reggie, try to. And Tommy Little, who was
Emmy
one of
Award,
our anchormen.
Emmy Award-winning Tommy.
Yes.
Tommy.
So Tommy says, "Tony, be sure to say hi to Reggie." Okay, Tommy, will do. So we get out there. I get out there early, like 4 o'clock. I go into the Yankee clubhouse. Nobody's really there yet. So now I go back out onto the field. At 5 o'clock, I see Reggie outside the Angels dugout talking to a group of reporters, including Jim Hill. So I walk over
Jim
to
Hill.
this group.
Jim Hill, by the way, still is working at
I
Channel 2.
know.
He was at Channel
I-
2 in 1975, and it'll be at Channel 2 in 2025. If
Is that unbelievable?
It's unbelievable.
It is.
Jim Hill was a former football player at Texas A&I. And
Correct.
He got a job in San Diego, and he segued into Los Angeles, and he's been here. He's been a staple on the local
Yep.
news scene
Incredible.
since 1975.
Yeah, unbelievable. Hardest working sports guy in LA, I think.
For sure. Anyway,
At
continue.
least he was. At least he was when I was there. So anyway, so Jim's in this group, And he's commiserating with Reggie, and now I'm thinking, okay, my chances are not going to be good. So they wanted him to be on the 5 o'clock news, which sports comes on at 5:35. So I go over, I'm trying to introduce myself to Reggie, but I walk up behind him and I say, "Excuse me, Reggie," and he starts to turn counterclockwise. Okay, and the whole group of like 6 guys, reporters, including Jim, they're turning with him, and we're going around in a circle, and he's trying to avoid me, I guess. But it's like a Keystone Cops movie. And we're all walking around in this circle, and we finally stop. And Jim says to him, "Can you come on live with me at 5:35?" And I'm thinking, oh, there it goes. And Reggie says to Jim, "I think I'm supposed to be on with this guy." And he points to me. And he looks away. So I said, "Great, Reggie. Thank you." And I run back to the camera. I said, "Okay, we have Reggie, I think." So now, it's getting close to airtime. Around 10 after 5, Reggie comes back out onto the field. And he runs down the right field line, down by the right field fence. And he starts doing wind sprints. Now, it wouldn't be cool for a sportscaster or anybody to run out to a player who's doing wind sprints and ask him, is he going to do the live shot or not? So I'm waiting. And now he walks over to center field. It's getting closer to 5:35. I'm standing with the camera. We always had a little monitor on the ground so that when highlights are played, you can see what's happening on the air. So Reggie now walks over to the left field line, and it's about 2 minutes to airtime. And I don't know if Reggie's going to come down or not. But finally, he jogs down to where we are, and he's standing near the camera, and he can see the monitor on the field, so he can see what's on the air. Ted Dawson was anchoring the sports in the studio, and Ted, as he's throwing it to me, Reggie gets up. Reggie was stretching, so he gets up, and he walks over to me, and we do the interview. Reggie gives me the greatest interview in interview history. Okay? Unbelievable. So he finishes. I thank him, and he says, "Was that good enough?" I said, "Reggie, you were perfect." And then, of course, he signed with the Angels years later, and we became more friendly whenever I'd go out to a game. We were never socially friendly, but at least we had a very good rapport when I'd go out to cover the Angels. So I've always been, since then, I've been a Reggie fan.
So that was your easiest interview, obviously, the Reggie Jackson interview.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
notwithstanding the fact that the sword of Damocles was hanging over your head, but he gave you a great interview. You tell us.
And so the next day, the news director, Dennis Swanson, comes up to me and says, "Great interview, Tony." He says, "You and Reggie must go way back." I said, "Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, we go way back."
And your toughest interview?
Toughest interview. Oh, my goodness, Billy. Outside of the non-interview with Steve Carlton,
Yeah.
toughest interview, man.
Well, we'll come back to that. How about
Yeah.
you tell me some stories about your observation when they were interviewing Doug Williams when he was the quarterback for the Skins. That's pretty interesting chapter, I thought.
Yeah, you did read the book, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
So
Good read, by the way, people out there. I encourage you to read the book. Always
Thank you.
turn down the first offer, which Tony obviously never did, but but there is some great advice on how to get to that position in the last chapter of the book. It's a good read, and I enjoyed
Thank
it,
you, Bill.
Tony. Thank you.
So this was San Diego, Redskins. Woo, who'd they play? Packers?
Washington? I'm thinking Miami.
Yeah.
Was it Washington?
No.
They say Redskins.
Okay, they played Sunday.
Anyway,
Yeah. Okay.
anyway, a long time ago. So anyway, we're in the locker room after a practice, and there was this young reporter, big group of guys around Williams, and there was this one reporter who asked him the question. He says, "Doug, how does it feel to be a black quarterback? That was the question. And silence came over the group of reporters at that moment. And we were all, trying not to laugh. But Williams is very polite. He looks back at him. He says, well, every game of football I've ever played, I was always a black quarterback, so I wouldn't know how else it could feel to be a black quarterback. And this poor kid, he didn't say a word after that. But you talk about dumb questions. I mean, I've asked my share of them, but that had to be all time.
A showstopper, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
If you had to go
How's it
back,
feel?
if you had to go back and do it all again, what would you do differently?
I turned down more first offers. I would get representation, Frank. I would have had an agent early on. Now, well, as I say that, maybe the opportunities
Wouldn't have
presented themselves quite as they had.
if you had an agent, because
If I had an agent,
that's correct.
So,
That's correct.
but I can't help but think that would have been a better way to go.
Yeah.
But speaking, and I don't mean to divert too much, but speaking of the thespian angle, yeah, I have a big passion for acting, and living in the town I live in now, in Whitefish, Montana, we have a great community theater here, and I've done a number of shows. One was called Now and Then. It's about time travel, where an older guy, me, goes back in time to try to change the relationship he had with the person who became his wife. So we always had discussions about that. If you could go back and change that, would you? And it's very easy to say, well, of course I would change this and this. But the truth is, you go back in time and change one thing, then that changes everything else in your future.
Yeah.
And you would not be who you are today. Maybe that's a good thing for some people, but it's a very interesting question. What would you change? But generally speaking, I just would have been smarter about my relationships with management.
Yeah, but
Because-
with wisdom comes age, or with age comes wisdom. What's that? So
Yeah, sure, that makes
Hey,
sense.
would you have come out of the closet earlier as a thespian? I always thought you had to be a woman to be a thespian.
Well, when I was working in Salinas, I did some stuff at a dinner theater in Carmel, California. That's when I really started getting interested. And then when I got the job in San Francisco and started working in major markets, I didn't do anything like that again, except for Rocky III, of course.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything like that again for, 30 some odd years.
But since
Although
you-
living here,
yes,
I got a part as a bartender and had some lines in The Ballad of Lefty Brown, starring Bill Pullman and Jim Caviezel. Henry Fonda was in it. Kathy Baker was in it. Tommy Flanagan. So I had a scene with Caviezel where he comes into the bar and we're going eyeball to eyeball, and they're shooting close-ups of me, and I'm thinking, wow, this is going to be unbelievable. Of course, none of those close-ups ever made it onto the film, but it was a wonderful experience. So yeah, I've done a few little things.
and you're doing acting now in Whitefish.
Yeah, nothing currently, but I've lived here now 18 years, Frank, and I've done over 40 productions here. Straight plays and musicals as well. So it's been fun. It's filled this little void that I've had, that I've always wanted to do this. And you gave me the opportunity to do some voiceovers on Head of the Class and George Lopez show, and I'm still getting residuals for those too.
Nice.
So thank you.
Don't spend them all in the same place.
Well, it's interesting because Tony makes a great point in his last chapter, how to become a sportscaster, one of the last chapters. And he said, be yourself. And he said acting classes can help you be a sportscaster, and that you won't be intimidated on camera. You'll be yourself, which is tough enough
Absolutely,
to do.
especially knowing that the business has changed to the point where doing news is very similar to show business, and even at the end of my career, I was getting the message, don't worry so much about the facts, okay? Make this entertaining. Make it enjoyable to watch.
Wow.
That's
If
incredible.
you have to sensationalize a little bit, it's okay. So that started to turn me off in the end, and it's one of the reasons why I retired.
That's
That
incredible.
sounds like a conspiracy.
No, that's really incredible when somebody tells you the news bit. Don't worry about the facts so much. Worry about being entertained.
Yeah.
That's an
Well,
astonishing line.
That's where we are in 2023.
Yeah,
Click-
I'm afraid
clickbait.
so.
Clickbait.
So if that's the case, I'm telling people, well, if you've never been on camera before or on a microphone, if you've never reported or worked in front of crowds of people, it's not a bad idea to try some acting classes, because you have to present yourself onto a camera or in front of people, and it can't hurt. And it certainly helped me. It helped me relax on camera. Just being in shows, acting.
And that's the same advice I give to directors. If you haven't worked as an actor before, you should go to an acting class and learn what the actor is going through, and because you can't direct them if you don't know what they're going through.
Good point.
Yeah.
Point.
You have any last
Yeah.
questions, Derek?
Yeah, I got a question. Well, first of all, I think you sing. Is this true?
Yes,
Yeah. What's your favorite?
I sing.
What's your favorite song to sing?
Lil Nas X.
My favorite song is I don't have a favorite.
Okay.
I like Broadway show tunes a lot. I played Fagin in Oliver
Nice.
here, and
Billy's
Reviewing the Situation is one of my favorite songs.
You've got
to
to
sing.
pick a pocket or two.
Yeah,
reviewing
that's
the
well,
reviewing the situation.
That's one of my favorites. I love show tunes.
Okay.
That's a terrific
okay.
play, Oliver.
Yeah.
Probably one of the best musicals ever written.
Yeah, it's a
great
great show.
Yeah, you have a great voice. Your voice is kind of. I see why Frank sent you out on some or picked you for some voiceover things.
Well, thank you, Derek. They here in Whitefish, and the county seat here is a town called Kalispell, which is bigger than Whitefish, and Kalispell was able to obtain a minor league baseball team last year, the Glacier Range Riders. They are an independent league. They're also called the Pioneer League, which I played in 1967, but they're not affiliated with Major League Baseball. They're partnered with MLB. So MLB funds them a bit and helps guide them to do it the MLB way. And MLB can sign players from their league if they buy out their contracts. Anyway, the Glacier Range Riders asked me to be their public address announcer, which I did, 48 home games. So that was a great thrill. It got me back into the game, and
They paid you
perform a little bit.
48 home games. They paid you what, $480 for the season?
That's not too far off, Frank. I didn't turn down the first offer again.
and 2 tickets.
Got 2 tickets and a free hot dog and a Coke.
It's pretty fun.
I have another question. Have you checked your Wikipedia lately?
I have not.
Okay, you should check it out. It's pretty. I think it's based on this interview. It's pretty inaccurate. It says that you were a lawyer, a politician, a member of the National Party of Honduras, a drug trafficker, and
That's not him.
There are a lot of Tony Hernandez's around. Yeah,
Billy?
I mean, if you type my name into Amazon.com for the book, it'll list 100 authors named Tony Hernandez. So
yeah, I bet.
you're not going to find it that way, but.
Billy, you got any closing thoughts?
Tony, I want to thank you for coming on. It's a pleasure to meet you. I really remember you broadcasting back in New York way back when. And be yourself seems like pretty good and sound advice. And that's pretty sound advice to give to anybody aspiring to do anything. Just be yourself. Everybody else is taken.
Let me ask you a question that I don't know the answer to, so I'm going to expose myself a little bit here. You say you live in Whitefish, Montana. Did you tell me the joke that has a whitefish payoff? And if so, can you?
No. I don't think so, Frank.
Okay. Well, it's a good joke. If I remember it, I'll tell it to you someday.
Okay, please.
All
Yeah.
right. Thanks so
Oh,
much.
wait. But no, there is one. Well, I mean, the one I know well is you know how to make a small fortune in whitefish. Come here with a large fortune.
That's not it, but that'll do.
Oh, okay.
Thanks,
That's
pal.
the only one I know.
Tony,
Thanks,
thank you very
pal.
much.
Pleasure.
Pleasure to meet you.
Thank
pal.
you. It was great fun.
Like
Thank
to
you.
Dale and the kids and the grandkids.
Thank you so much.
All
It
right.
was great.
See you soon.
All righty.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Tony. Very personable guy, nice guy.
Yeah.
lovable guy.
A good interview, too. The guy's
Yeah.
a survivor. He worked in the broadcast business from 71 to 2002.
You know, he really should take a bow because he talks about how he got lucky and he got in so young and he got a couple of big breaks, and that's true. But when you go through the door, you got to have the gear, and
Yep.
he managed to slip and slide and do what he had to do, and
Yep.
you know, what is it? Fake it till you make it. Is that it? But
Fake it till you make it.
that's what he came to New York and
And
did
that's
what he had to do.
and that's the secret to my career.
Fake
I'm
it
still
till you make it.
I'm still faking it. I'm not yet made it, but I'm still faking it. Anyway, until next time,
Yes, until next time. Thank you so much for looking at, folks. We really appreciate it.
and thank you. Another stirring performance out of our intrepid third man in the booth, Derek Harris.
I think he was in the aircraft carrier.
I
He's
think-
intrepid. He's intrepid now.
The thing I loved most about this job is working with Frank Pace.
Personable man.
The question is, when this is all over, will he be one of the 120 that like me or the 240 that hate me?
Or the 241s that got fired.
Yeah.
Good one. Good one.
All right. Good night.
All right. Good night, folks. Thanks very much. Good day, folks. Good night, folks. Thanks for looking in. Oh.
Next week's guest, Senior Vice President of Casting for Warner Brothers Discovery Television, Tony Sepulveda.
We'll see you next week